Welcome to our webinar, a joint initiative by the Open Group and ITSMF International.
Yeah, thank you, Patrik. Welcome to this seminar. As you see here, we have 3 presentations coming next. I will do a high-level introduction of one of the key challenges that we see of integrating enterprise architecture and service management. And after that, we have a presentation by Tomas about enterprise architecture and service management, but then in the topic of how does it relate to a compliancy like DORA and criticality of your assets. How do you manage that compliancy specifically around the DORA framework? And then Shell will present their story, Frank van der Wolf, their story about integrating architecture and IT service management. But let me start with the presentation from my side is basically introducing some of the key challenges that we see that most organizations are facing today. And it's related to how do you connect the various disciplines in your IT organization to actually create a sort of improved IT operating model. What you see is we have different practices, disciplines within IT management, challenges how to integrate all the different practices together to really create an integrated digital operating model. And we see many challenges out there today. If you think about from an architecture perspective, how can we rationalize and modernize our application landscape? Or how do we deliver faster and safer? We talk about how can I improve the user experience or ensure continuity, resiliency. If you think about risk management challenges, how do I ensure that my IT is compliant? And DORA is an example, but also think about data privacy and security controls. Optimize your financials, your cost efficiency, reduce costs. Or how do I integrate and work with my increasing number of vendors that I work with in my ecosystem? And at the same time, security operations. How do I manage the increasing volume of security threats, security issues, vulnerabilities? So the real challenge nowadays is how do I integrate the different practices together to create more integrated delivery model and to cover these kind of challenges that many organizations are facing today. And it all starts with that foundation that we're going to talk about today, the foundation of understanding how do I support my business? So it starts with an architectural view. What are the, let's say, the business process that I support? What kind of applications do I have that enables these business processes? And where is it running? What are the technology components? Where is it hosted? In the cloud, private cloud? All these kind of dependencies. What kind of application integrations do I have? Dependencies between applications. And with the end-to-end picture of understanding how all this IT supports my business, but also creates value and outcome. So the key challenges that we face is how do I get an insight from a business process down to the infrastructure? And typically how we manage that today is we have different disciplines working on this end-to-end landscape. We have architecture management building this picture. We got service management, maintaining a CMDB. And across those two worlds, we also have service and application and product portfolio management, managing the portfolio for your services. So one of the key challenges that we face nowadays is how do I make sure that I have an integrated view of how IT enables the business? And let me explain a bit how many organizations are currently trying to solve that, but also how do I integrate those two worlds? So on the left side, we let's say we have the architecture view, the as planned and designed. So here we maintain inside what are the business capabilities we have, what kind of business processes do we have, how is that supported by the application as I mentioned, but also understand what data is managed within IT and which applications process what data or business processes, because that's needed for insight of your data privacy and security. And of course, understand how all these applications are supported by different technology stacks. Hosting could be cloud, Azure cloud, on-premise data center, network technologies, and so on. Basically managing our digital product portfolio. But this is already very challenging for many organizations to maintain this kind of view, but this is the design state view. Understand how I enable the business. And then we have let's say the deploy, the actual state, where we maintain, for example, in the CMDB, the actual deployments. And typically an application has different instances, environments, like a production instance and a test instance. And then they will be supported by different teams. There's an SLA associated with it for support. And each instance runs on your different IT resources, cloud resources, basically the configuration items, being a web server, a database, virtual machine, storage. And then you build a whole topology. So this represents the actual deployment states and understand what versions are running where. Now, the challenge is that typically those two systems, but also the two different practices are not very well integrated. So What is very important nowadays is to create a solid data foundation, a backbone for IT. Understand not just what applications I have, but also understand where they're running, what are the actual versions and products used, what are the potential vulnerabilities out there. So basically integrating those two worlds together to get a real understanding of how IT is enabling the business, but also manage your cost, manage your risk, manage your compliance related to it, and security, for example. Now, this is a challenging area that many organizations are currently focusing on, and we're going to talk about this later with the other presentation as well. And the challenge that many organizations are facing is that they need this integrated view end-to-end from a business process down to the application, to the infrastructure, both the design state as the actual state, but we typically have different systems and practices and processes to support that. You might have your own enterprise architecture system where we have an Archimate model, for example. Often organizations also have separate application portfolios and then the CMDB, but they're not always very well integrated. But the world is a little bit more complex even than that. We also have the development teams working with their development tools, and they create software packages. And nowadays we talk about the builds, but also software bill of material. So here we have inside what actually is being built. And then we have the actual deployment tools, like say going to Azure Cloud. There we know what resources are actually deployed, what versions are running where. And then we also have security operations. They're going to discover our cloud resources as well, look at vulnerabilities, patches levels, and so on. So they also collect configuration data, understanding the actual software components running out there, but then from a security vulnerability perspective. But even monitoring nowadays, we call that observability. They will discover the landscape, understand how the application is supported by infrastructure, and build that topology as well. And then we have the CMDB maintaining that topology. So we see there's a lot of data maintained around this end-to-end business model, from a business process to the application to the infrastructure. So how do we integrate that together to get a single view of what is running where and how does the business enabled? And that's where also IT for IT is focusing on how can I create a solid, let's say, product backbone, data backbone that support everything we do in IT. Because most organizations now realize if you want to improve your IT, getting better insight in value, your risk or your cost or time to market, you need to understand the bottom layer here. What are the products and services do I have? Where is it running? So basically connecting your enterprise architecture with the CMDB, service management, to build this kind of data foundation, because everything we do in IT is basically linked to this foundation, whether it's projects, roadmaps, technology refresh, whether it's related to development and releasing new versions, or risk management, or managing change, managing service requests if people want to have access to a business application or request resources, or handling costs or manage incidents, vulnerabilities. All these end-to-end activities are all dependent on this data foundation. And that's where we see that most organizations are focusing on how can I create a solid data foundation that is used by all the other processes in IT. Basically, as I mentioned, understanding how from a business capability, business process down to the application, to the infrastructure, how is everything connected, both from a design state as well as an operational state. So basically summarizing, how do we create that backbone for managing IT, connecting your enterprise architecture, the planning and design state with your service management state, connecting them together so that you can share the information of what's running where, what does it cost, and where to invest in, but also handle technology depth, technology refresh, and improved, let's say, cost efficiency at the same time. So that's providing a high-level overview. Next, we're going to zoom into one of those topics, and that Thomas will talk about that. One of the key elements nowadays is also compliance and risk management, as I mentioned. So we'll take a perspective of integrating those two worlds together, talking about DORA from a compliance perspective. Thomas, up to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Rob, and good morning to everyone from Slovakia. So DORA is an acronym for the Digital Operational Resilience Act. It's the European Union regulation which should improve the resiliency for the financial institution. One of the requirements from the DORA is that you should be able to identify the critical ICT assets and the vendors who are connected to these to the management of these ICT assets. So they are defining something what is called a critical business function, which is something what is supported by the ICT assets. So you need to make a decomposition from these business critical business functions to the ICT assets and then to the vendors. So there are several questions you need to answer, like what is business function? What's the difference between the business function, product, and services? What are the ICT assets which supports the functions? Which of them are critical, and how you can decompose that? So usually processes and application relationships are managed in some architecture modeling tool, and it's part of the, I would say, the enterprise architecture, as Rob mentioned. And to be able to have the full dependency between the applications, you also need the information about the integration among applications, which is usually managing also in architecture modeling tool. But you need a connection between the application and the infrastructure. So application versus servers versus network. And this is usually stored within the CMDB, and it's managed by different group of people. So what is the key to be able to provide and fulfill these requirements is the integrated environment. So how we approach this in VUB Bank, we have started from the product catalog, which is what is a source of product and services we are providing to our customers, and it's a good base to identify the business functions. So from this, we have selected and identified some business functions, also with the activities which are based on which are requirements for the banking license. Then we have used business impact analysis. What is a process within the business continuity management, which makes a connection between which has the methodology how to identify the critical processes. So we have connected these products and services with the processes. From the BIA, we have identified which are critical. We are using the process catalog, which is the list of all the processes with the information about the process owners and the description of the process to identify the scope and to validate with the business users if the process is correctly identified and if it supports the critical business functions. Then we need a process model, which is typically in some modeling tool like an ARIS, or it can be just Excel file, which decompose the process to the activities. So for example, if you have a process like cash deposit, you have all these activities like identification of the customer. Customer will insert his money to the ATM. Then there is some processing and the process end when the customer have increase on his current account. And then you need to have a link between the activities and the application which supports that. So, for example, credit on the current account, impacted application is the core banking system or deposit core banking system. Because from the BIA, business users are typically able to identify only I would say the first touch of contact. So first application they are interacting with. So then you need some application architecture model which describes the integration between the application, because from the BI you have only the front-end applications, but there are some back-end applications which supports the front-end. Then you need to have a connection between the application and the infrastructure, and this is typically in the CMDB. In our environment, these two worlds, like Enterprise Architecture Modeling Tool and the CMDB, are, I would say, not well integrated. There is just link between the applications. So from our perspective, we need to make also some manual work to connect these two worlds. And then you need to identify the ICT services. So for example, who operates the system, who performs the development on the systems, and so on. And based on that, you will get the list of suppliers or list of critical suppliers where you need to address the DORA requirements for them. So if I will take a simple example, like I have a company which is doing the haircut. So my business functions are some haircut. So this is the product I'm delivering, or this is the service I'm delivering to my customers. I have some ability to make an appointment. Then, of course, customer needs to pay for the service, and as I need to pay taxes, I need some accounting. So from the DORA perspective, the accounting service, for example, I can outsource it to different company. So from my point of view, this is some kind of outsourcing service. I have the identification of the company or vendor who supports that. Then haircut service. This is my, I would say, the core business. If I will not make haircut, then I can close the company. So haircut service is identified as a critical business function. This critical business function typically consists of some people. So I need some hairdresser, some tools and applications. So I need skissers, I need hair clipper, and some process, which in this case is the haircut process, so how to make a haircut. But the hair clipper is usually electronic device, so it needs some energy. And there is another dependency to the energy service, which is again the outsourcing, and I would say the critical outsourcing. For the appointment service, it's a service I can provide to my customer, but I don't classify it as a critical, because if I won't do any appointments, then I will take just people who are walking around. So again, this appointment service consists of process, how to order, of some people, so assistant who will schedule the appointments, and some applications or tools like calendar, pen, or phone. For the payment service, this is if people will not pay for my services for the haircut service, then again I can close my company. So payment service is also classified as a critical business function, and it consists of the payment process. So some people came, give me my money, I will record them in the cash desk. So I need cash desk as an application or the tool, and I need some person who will perform that. I can have more channels on the payment service. So for example, people are able to pay with the cash, or they can pay with the credit or debit card. So the good point is that if you will also integrate the channel, which is used for the providing of the service, to the model when you are identifying the services, because then you can be sure that you have identified all the critical business functions. So from this perspective, the ICT assets or the critical assets are the hair clipper, skissers, and the cash desk. All other assets are participating on the business critical function decomposition. However, they are not classified as critical. So in that case, if I will make a list of the vendors, then provider of the energy is a critical vendor, provider of the accounting service is a critical, provider of the skissers and hair clipper is a critical, provider of the cash desk is also the critical vendor. So in this simple example, I can show you how we approach the DORA requirements. So based on that, as we are bank, you can imagine that we have the services like cash deposits, payments, cash withdrawal, providing the deposits, and so on. So these are all the services which you need to decompose on that level. That's all from my side. So Frank, stage is yours.
Hello, thanks. And my name is Frank van der Wolf, and at Shell, I am the lead architect IT for IT. Thanks, Rob, for the invite to present on this topic. It just so happens to be that I have enterprise architecture tooling and IT service management in my very extensive IT for IT portfolio. So what I would like to do is take the next 20 minutes and give you an impression on how we integrate these two against the overall powering progress strategy of Shell. And I could talk for hours on that, but I do realize that we only have 20 minutes. So first, what I would like to do is to give you a context of what Shell is and what our powering progress strategy actually entails, so that we have a good backdrop to discuss these topics against that. But before I do that, I have to show you this cautionary note, because this is a public event, and Shell is a publicly listed company. So I kindly ask you to not use any of the information that I share with you today to take financial investment decisions regarding Shell. So that makes my public comms department very happy. So what about Shell? Shell has a long history from being established since, 1907. And over the past 117 years, a lot of things have changed. We've seen an immense growth in population. We have seen a lot of geopolitical evolvements, an increase in supply and demand, but most importantly for Shell, an increase in energy demand. And Shell has transformed over the years as well. But our purpose and objective has remained the same, which is to provide energy products and solutions for the world. And as such, in today's world, it wouldn't surprise you that digital and IT are foundational for Shell. We have a 10,000 people strong IT organization and a very, very large IT real estate, as you can see from the numbers here at the slide. And as such, digitalization is one of the key enablers for Shell's powering and progress strategy. And this strategy is all about the 4 topics you see here. Digitalization provides strong returns for our shareholders by reducing the cost and improving the productivity, the reliability, and the performance of our activities. That's where it all starts. We need to have the money to do this. But digitalization is also very important in our transition to a net zero emissions future. We use technologies and AI to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. We need to optimize our operations, reduce waste, and offer low carbon solutions. And next to that, digital tools also help us to enhance clean energy technology, such as wind farm design and hydrogen storage. Digitalization also helps to powering lives, and we have developed a set of digital tools to enhance inclusivity and support sustainability. Last but not least, digitalization is also important in respecting nature. We are working with academic partners and have developed digital tools to promote transparency and environmental sustainability. Now, the energy transition and the digitalization is leading us to a different energy system. And to support that from an IT perspective, we set out on a new strategy, which is highly dependent on digital mastership. There are 2 key factors that help our business to transform and adapt to changes very rapidly. The first one is that we have adopted a market standard and less strategy, because roughly 80% of our processes that we use are parity. So rather than building solutions in-house, we try to identify market leaders and use their solutions, because the market leaders are much faster at innovating their products than we possibly can do ourselves. And a great example of this, and especially in this setting, is us adopting ServiceNow as our strategic platform to manage our end-to-end IT value chain. And the second important factor is the way that we have set up our IT delivery and support organization. We have distinct horizontal IT capabilities such as data and software engineering, design engineering, and ERP, and a business back aligned support organization. Now, to enable our powering progress strategy, our IT vision basically boils down to delivering value at speed. And in doing so, we are also making a paradigm shift to DevOps. And for DevOps, the vision is to basically provide autonomy to the DevOps teams to develop, deliver, operate, and evolve scalable digital products at high speed, quality, and performance. There are 2 important enablers for that, which I will address in a couple of minutes. And that is touchless change management and intelligent operations. It's the automation of change management and auto monitoring and self-healing of our landscape, and only use humans by exception. And alongside of all this, we have the perpetual combination of business strategy, portfolio management, and architecture to analyze the business requirements and translate that into tangible digital products that are to be delivered by our DevOps teams. Now, if we look at the part of architecture in all this, Shell-wide, we have roughly 700 architects working around the clock with our engineering and delivery teams to basically analyze requirements and take well-informed IT decisions to deliver digital products. And in doing so, an important part is to deliver the architecture artifacts that you see ranged here. It goes from cross-business enterprise level all the way down to line of business specific portfolio and product line artifacts and solution and digital product artifacts, up to and including a handover to our engineering teams. And what is good to mention is that our architects really make an effort to work and be a part of the natural teams. For example, my team in IT for IT is embedded in the ServiceNow. We have about 10 DevOps teams for ServiceNow, and we are an essential part of that team. The artifacts that we produce, you see that ranging from enterprise. We have an enterprise vision and strategy and principles. We have a set of foundational technology services that we can use across the spectrum in Shell. But we also describe our business in a capability model and an enterprise-wide data model. And per portfolio and product line, which are part of the various lines of businesses that we have, we develop our own visions and strategy and use our own domain principles. And we make technology positioning because not all vendors are suitable for a cross portfolio. We have a portfolio-specific technology that we use. And together with our portfolio managers, we develop the portfolio roadmap and do assessments, do mapping of capabilities against applications for capability-based planning. And obviously, there are domain-specific data models to allow interoperability of the data between the applications that we have in the domains and also across Shell in general. And for the detailed product and solution architectures, we have defined a whole set of artifacts to describe what that solution is, the architecture's decisions that we take to develop these solutions, everything related to application and data and technology, the implementation and deployment, how we secure and operate that application. That's all well described. And it's good to mention here that we predominantly use BizDesign here as our weapon of choice to record all this. And obviously we use the Archimate language to describe the vast majority of our artifacts. We also have Power Designer for our data architecture specific items. But it's exactly in the engineering handover where we need to make a translation from Archimate to information that is digestible by our engineering teams, such as technical design details and sequence diagrams and whatnot. And that's an important step that we need to make, because in the modeling that we do and the analysis that we do, we heavily depend on the data that we master and govern in ServiceNow. ServiceNow has a great common service data model from which we use our application and application deployments. We share a capability model from BizDesign to ServiceNow and our capability mapping as well. That really helps to describe the landscape as designed, basically referring to all the information that Rob shared previously in this webinar. Now, where architecture and IT service management meet, that's exactly at the intersections of the two parts that you see here. On the left-hand side, we have architecture as designed with all our processes and artifacts that we produce. And on the right-hand side, we have a section that describes the other end-to-end IT value chain processes up to and including IT service management. And it's exactly at the intersection of these two where, for example, application portfolio management and digital interface management really substantiate the implementation and deployment of our applications. It's to keep good track of these things. I could talk for hours about that, but unfortunately we don't have the time on that. So you remember that I mentioned two key enablers for delivering value at speed, and one of them is touchless change management. And that segues into implementation and deployment. In making our paradigm shift towards DevOps, we also realized that our waterfall delivery processes and the very well-defined ITIL change management processes are basically not permitting our speed of delivery. It usually takes about 6 days to get a CAB approval so that you can prepare for production deployment. With touchless change management, the automation of change management, we seek to accelerate that change from days to minutes. And we have already implemented that, and it's proving to be very successful. And what it boils down to is that the DevOps teams can work on their backlog and prepare production deployments. But before actually doing that deployment, they need to pass several quality gates, ranging from all sorts of testing, code scans, and what have you, to ensure that what they do meets the quality that is needed and will not disturb any production environment. But rather than waiting for an approval to deploy, we have developed a mechanism to, in parallel of a production deployment, collect all the evidence from the respective repositories where that evidence is located, and automatically create a change request, populate that with all the evidence, approve that change request, and close it, so that we have a nice audit trail alongside of a speedy deployment of our products. Now that is really good, and that really helps to accelerate that fast delivery, but it does pose us with an operational dilemma, and even without the DevOps strategy, we have that dilemma, because if we look at the end-to-end IT value chain, we are constantly translating information, and we are translating business strategy into architecture design and analysis. And that is translated to technical design and implementation documentation. And at the end of the day, we need to operate the whole thing. And if we look at what we're doing, we're constantly abstracting information. We are translating PowerPoint presentations into Archimate language. We're translating Archimate into all kinds of UML, Visios, and what have you to describe how we actually technically design things and implement it. And then at the last stage, we have our CMDB, where we carefully record all the assets that we have deployed in our IT landscapes. But it's basically still at this point pretty much isolated stovepipes and translation of information. So you can imagine that from an operational perspective, it's really looking through the keyhole when incidents occurred and try to figure out how an application is implemented and where the problem actually resides. And there is some information available, but what often lacks is the vision and the view on what else is impacted. If you look at the integrations and the interconnectivity between applications, let alone the ability to decide and to determine who in the business is impacted and to what extent they are impacted. And that is where the translation from architecture design and analysis to technical design and implementation plays a very important role. And I mentioned that we use Archimate. We're also piloting with a language called C4 to be more descriptive of what we design and what we implement. Archimate is a really nice language, but it allows for a lot of ambiguity if you don't use it correctly. That's something I teach a lot of classes about in Shell, but it remains quite cumbersome to do proper design and analysis in Archimate. And C4, I see it as a digitalization of the digitalization. It helps to be more specific and describe what you're going to do and how you're going to do that. And that helps to populate our CMDB better. Because from an operational perspective, and that is the other key enabler that we're working on right now, is the ability to self-heal events if and when they occur. We have a huge IT real estate, as you've seen, and we have a plethora of observability tools that can generate a lot of events. Now, the trick is, of course, to do denoise and deduplicate all the events. And that's where we're using the event data and the data in our CMDB and AI technology to correlate these events. And it's correlation. But that gives us at least a step or an improvement of our current incident management process to decide that particular patterns that reoccur can be addressed with solutions, self-healing solutions from a solution library, so that either the observability tools can make a correction to something that goes wrong automatically, or we use a solution from our predefined set of libraries because we recognize this pattern, we recognize what's going on, and we can auto-correct that. Alongside, we use that correlation information to enhance our incident information as well. It gives us much more insight. For example, by looking at was there a change at the time of the incident that occurred? And that refers back to touchless change management. It's all nice and dandy that you have your DevOps teams operate autonomously, but if they create problems, that is a very important feedback that we need to capture as well. And so this is what we're actually deploying at the moment and working and learning from. And the whole gist is that at the end of the day, the interactions with our application support providers and our DevOps teams is only invoked when these intermediary solutions are not capable to do this automatically and to the desired effect. Last but not least, and it's my final slide, is the importance of a complete and accurate CMDB and beyond that. We've been struggling a lot with the concept of single source of truth. It's you can imagine that with all the various businesses that we have in Shell and the vast portfolios that we have, it's really, really difficult to bring that all data all together in one single repository. But I must say we've come a long end, and it's pretty impressive. It's looking at boiling the ocean versus structuring chaos when you look at single source of truth versus a single source of reference. Very important thing is how do you maintain data quality of your CMDB? The world is continuously changing, especially in our cloud environments, and you need to be updated about that on a very frequent basis. And not only the assets, but also their relationships. We also realized, and I think everybody realizes, that there is not one single source of information to build your CMDB upon. We have a plethora of legacy applications in on-premise data centers, and we also use various hyperscalers. We use PaaS and SaaS platforms. There's a lot of data that needs to be collected from that. And not all environments permit auto-discovery. So we had to we had to extend our portfolio by reusing data that is collected by our observability and security tools. That data serves a very good purpose, and it can also be used to distill the interoperability between the assets that you have in your CMDB. And last but not least, and that is really something I'm looking forward to further develop, is the relationship between application components and infrastructure. We have, as said, we have our architecture artifacts that describe at a more abstract level what's going on. We have our technical design documentation. We have our assets in our CMDB. And we need to work not only as Shell, but also with our vendors to make a paradigm shift from correlation to causation. Because you can throw all the intelligence in the world at it. At the end of the day, it remains correlation. And we have the actual information. We know how things were built at deployment time. And currently, we're mitigating that by using automated horizontal and vertical discovery. Horizontal as in finding out what are all the dots that you see here in the diagram, what are all the assets that we have out there. And the vertical discovery is all about what is the relationship or a possible relationship between these elements. And for that we use the ServiceNow ITIL service mapping. And that gives us a next step into making more sense of what is actually designed and how it's delivered and how it operates. With that, I hope, I'm exactly within time still. I hope I've given you some impression on how we interoperate between architecture and IT service management, and I look forward to answer your questions in the Q&A. Back to you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank. It's a really nice overview this way, because it aligns to the discussion we had, like how you, and I like the picture you just showed with the, let's say, the operational dilemma of how information is flowing from, let's say, the design architecture phase and then moved along the pipeline, let's say, to the operational side. And many organizations struggle that a lot of information is lost, like you said. There's a really nice view of that. So that brings us to the end of talking, and we have some time for Q&A. But maybe just to summarize, I think this is really, that you showed as well, Frank and Thomas as well, a really important topic, that how can you bring that, let's say, that insight of from an architecture perspective down to the operational side, how things are being connected, but also what has changed and why have things changed. So, and as I mentioned before also, it's not a simple task, right? We talk about architecture, your design, your build, your operations, your monitoring, as you mentioned, Frank, as well. Monitoring also relies on configuration data, but also discovers some own configuration data. And you mentioned that the application dependency is the key element on that as well. So how do you connect those things together? So hopefully this is also an interesting topic for later, when we also plan some further webinars on how can you take a more data-driven approach to your IT, create, as we mentioned, a solid backbone of understanding the products and services you have, and also the link to business process. That was interesting how Tomas was saying from a compliance, but also risk and continuity perspective, you need to understand what are the IT products and services, how they enable the business critical processes, the business critical functions, what vendors are involved in your ecosystem. And it not just related to risk compliance, but also the user experience and the customers, the costs, efficiency. So it's a very challenging area. And I think this has been a great presentation on this topic about, almost like a data-driven approach to enable this end-to-end view. So now it's time for a Q&A.